Now, President Bola Tinubu's recent nationwide broadcast addressing the ongoing protest has continued to generate reactions. Some have wildly commended the president, others expressed divergent views. The president's speech highlighted key economic initiatives aimed at alleviating the struggle faced by many Nigerians, particularly in the wake of rising living costs. What are some of these issues? Well, let's get talking again and break this down. The Chief Executive Officer, RTC Advisory, Mr. Opeyemi Agbaje, is live in the studio. Good afternoon. It's good to have you here.
Good afternoon, Tolu.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming in. I think I need to start this way because we've had you in to speak about policies of government. This all started from the candidate saying, subsidy has to go, we need to open up the exchange market. At the end of the day, this has been done, and some Nigerians are saying, we must sell fuel for 100 naira. How possible is that after all of this has been done? What do you make of this project, this initiative? Where are we? Where do we start to get the positives?
Okay, thank you very much, Tolu. The country has gone through a difficult season, but we have to retain our heads. We have to retain our cool. I'm happy the president made that broadcast, and I think his speech was coherent and logical, and was strong communication coming directly from the mouth of the president. Those who wanted him to announce that we are returning petrol prices to, and we are reinstating the subsidy, or that we are fixing the exchange rate at 200 naira to the dollar, will be disappointed. And that those who genuinely feel that there was nothing, a kind of olive branch for the protesters. I think that the president was correct to stand by the policy, which were arrived at after a lot of consideration. We've spent the last decade debating these issues, and we've spent the last decade avoiding these things, and we bankrupted the country in the process. I think that if there is a significant critique of government that you can fairly make, it may be that perhaps we've not been swift enough, speed of execution, communication, in terms of, so we could have had a minimum wage 3 months, 2 months, 1 month after the fuel subsidy removal was announced. Why did it take us 1 year after we announced the CNG initiative to still be talking about introduction of it? So some may, with fairness, question the speed of execution. I have on this program questioned the communication. I don't think, even up to now, that we've sufficiently communicated all of these things. And bearing in mind where the people are genuinely going through a hard time. That's not a fact. There may be others who have a different political motive or a different objective, but the poor person, the average person, is sincerely experiencing a tough time. The middle class even are experiencing tough times. You and I are dealing more with higher cost of living and have to think through our expenditure. Yeah. So I think there's need for faster, more efficient execution. I think there may be important positions in which we have to look at who is occupying the position. We have to look at a better communication, informed communication, and empathic communication. Communication that comes from a place of, like the president did. I hear you. I feel what that
food on my table. So now let's look at palliatives and other moves by government to address this challenge. What would you also say about the execution of some of this?
I think we've done a lot of ad hoc things.
Yeah, 570 billion states, 5 billion.
This one, and there's, again, there's a lot of money that has gone to the states. One of the points that I think the government is evidently now realizing is that it should have held the states accountable in some manner, formal or informal, for the funds that they were receiving. it should have been, at the very least, if you couldn't find, due to constitutional constraints, a formal way of holding the states to account, there's the court of public opinion. We did that once before in this country. The federal government at a point was publishing all the allocations. The states didn't like it because you're putting information in the hands of the citizens of those states to hold them accountable. Yeah. And we have to do that. And even in devising mechanisms for palliatives, I think that we can be creative in creating systems that ensure accountability. I think that those are some of the challenges. I don't get the sense in our states, and some might say with the exception of Lagos, and I just think that, but I don't get the sense in many of the states of the Federation that these governments have more money available to the people, that there is more going to the grassroots. And if that had happened, perhaps the events of the last 1 week may have been avoided. And then those governors, then some of them have the audacity to then be inciting their own citizens, because I think there were some cases in which the messages I heard from some of the governors were clearly inciting of their populace. That's because we didn't hold them accountable, and we allowed them to get away with it and then turn their fingers, point fingers at the federal government. So we need to build mechanisms that ensure accountability and sustainability in designing all these palliatives. I think the approach has been rather ad hoc, and we need stronger mechanisms. And I believe that the creative process will produce stronger mechanisms and more sustainable initiatives. I've seen on platforms people complaining. In my community, they sent us 2 bags of rice. All of those kind of comments do not suggest that there's sufficient rigor in the design of these schemes. I must mention that from what I've seen across the country, one of the major imperatives that came out of the protest is the imperative for mass education, particularly in the northern part of the country. I think the problems we see, the populace we see demonstrating, or not even demonstrating, rioting and looting and destroying in many parts of the country, I don't think their problem is hunger. I think their problem is, first of all, education and skills and having a purpose in life. And, so this has brought to fore again the need for massive investments in education, skills, technical competencies, adult education, remedial education, skills training, and all of that.
The NCC park that was looted in Kano State yet to be inaugurated.
Yes, so
that would have added.
Yeah, but you see, look, the one that has been most poignant for me was those hundreds of young people breaking culverts. I think it was in Kano or wherever, or Kaduna, I'm not sure again, but they were breaking culverts to extract the metal rods from them. It was an industry, the whole streets. Everybody breaking his own culverts and extracting. So that just tells us we have a big problem. We have a big problem in this country. And it boils down to a problem of education and skills for our youth.
I'm again looking at another very important thing, debt. The country has spent 97% of revenue on debt service, according to President Bola Tinubu, and now 68% in the last 13 months. That seems to be like a plus.
It's a big plus. Good. And it's not lying. We know that under the power regime, at the point we were almost close to 100% of income on debt service.
On debt service.
Not on debt repayment, on servicing existing debt. And therefore, that's why we went into ways and means. I think one of the things that I've seen, and I've said this on several occasions, are people were not sufficiently aware of the state in which the economy was on May 29, 2023.
True.
And perhaps if people had an understanding that we were more or less a bankrupt country, we were at the edge of...
Our reserves were down.
Reserves were down, were mortgaged, our oil was sold up front, and we were borrowing to survive and spending almost... If it was an individual, consider that was yourself. You were spending 97% of your salary to service interest on debts. You would technically be bankrupt.
Yes.
You will be a bankrupt person.
Yeah.
You'll be... So that was the state in which the country was. I think because we didn't have sufficient understanding, because we didn't have the collapse before this reform started, I think that allows many people to make fairly unrealistic projections and demands. I mean, I can't stop talking about people who expected the president to say the subsidy is back and the fuel price will now be 197. That person clearly does not have an understanding of where we were and what the essence of what we are trying to do is. However, I do agree that, like I've said earlier, that we needed to be more proactive with the social schemes that we're introducing. We needed, and we still need to design better mechanisms for distributing them, ensuring that they have the impact on the target population, and making sure they're sustainable and not just throwing things at people and achieving very meager impact.
We've seen improved FAC, of course. The governors are smiling to the bank. But let's look at major infrastructure projects, because that would also, of course, help enhance inclusive growth and achieve inclusive growth and all of that. We've seen the Lagos-Calabar Highway, Sokoto, and all of this. But let's look at how this would also impact the ordinary man. How do you make of it?
Unfortunately, the ordinary man will only feel the impact when the roads are
finally completed.
And so for him, conversations about the impact of a Lagos-Calabar road or a Lagos-Sokoto
is on one side.
It may seem academic and unrealistic. But the reality is that I fully see the rationale of projects like that. They connect communities, they ease access to markets. Transportation is perhaps one of the most fundamental drivers of development. And you can see that on a retail level. I remember a street that I know in a community in Ogun State that was tarred. I can imagine the development that I see and I measure almost on a day-to-day basis, the development on that street within a year or two of that road being tarred. That street would have remained, and there will be no shops on that street, there will be no commercial entities on that street, there will be no business on that street. Now that's a totally different picture, just a year or two down the line. And that's the transformative impact of transport infrastructure. If you read history, students of economic history will know that location of bus stations, location of transport stations, transport routes have been critical enablers of development. Towns in which those transportation hubs have been, whether ports or rail or road, have been catalysts for development. So I thoroughly support that. I think the president is bold in terms of his determination, even the willingness to take on those kind of projects at a time like this. We need to be careful in terms of funding and all of that. But clearly we cannot avoid infrastructure projects if we want to develop this economy.
Let's a lot in that speech, honestly. But let's look at the oil and gas industry. I know that's also a bit strategic. PIA and production hitting 1.6 million. That's not where we should be, but it's fairly better. Yesterday, NNPC came up with a new brand of crude. All of this, what do you think about wrapping up and how it will also impact?
Obviously, in the short term, oil demand is a fundamental variable. Oil production, production that we achieve of oil is a fundamental factor for our recovery. 1.6 million barrels per day. I see people who argue with that figure. I also see varying figures. So we achieve 1.6, then it goes down to 1.4, 1.5, 1.4. So it is important that we ramp up investments. And the president mentioned 2 new investments in the sector, totaling, I think it's $500 million.
Yes.
So what the fundamental thing is to stimulate, catalyze new investment. Because that's where the cycle starts from. The investment comes, the production comes, your production increases. I hope that can be sustainable. I will have to deal with issues of oil theft, management in the sector. Our NNPC happens to be not very credible in the eyes of most people because of their past. And so they have to earn our trust and the trust of the markets. Because ultimately we would have to ask people to invest in that NNPC. They promised us Kaduna Refinery. I told you in this studio months back that, well, I will wait until I see that. And so we've not seen any of the activation of the refineries that the NNPC has promised. Money has gone,
supposed to come on stream too.
Yes, money has gone down the drain, and it is clear at this point that the reactivation of both the Dangote, the production of PMS from the Dangote refinery and the reactivation of production from the government-owned refineries are now fundamental factors that can help resolve our economic crisis. So I think the president may also focus on those.
So looking forward, it's always good to have an outlook because what do you think? How do we go through this process? Like many will say, there's supposed to be at the time where you initiate the project, gestation period, when you start to now. Yeah, so how long?
I think the president should consider over the next few days some important symbolic actions.
Short term?
In the immediate, I said days. That can show, so for instance, cost of governance, that can show some seriousness. Personnel, where there are errant people, where there are people who have not performed in 6 months, ministers, why not? I think the people need some symbolic evidence. Yes. At the level of an analyst, I can stand by the things the president said. At the emotive level of the streets, we need some signs.
You need to see some things.
And that will come. We had spoke about also a report. What have we done about that? Perhaps we could do that. Generally across government, I think we need to improve the speed of execution and the urgency. There is an emergency. I don't think we've acted in many cases as if this is an emergency. So communication has to be increased. We have to find people who can communicate with competence, knowledge, but also with empathy, who understand where the people are and don't speak technical jargon to people. So there needs to be some symbolic, I think, just to... Of course, there are political aspects of this, and I believe the president understands the politics of Nigeria better than I do, and he would have made some observations about the political aspects of that. Ours is a business program, but there are clearly some strong political dimensions to this. Yes.
Always interesting having you in the studio, Chief Executive Officer, RTC Advisory, Mr. Okpeyemi Agbaje. Thank you so much